Michael Jackson sold hundreds of millions of records, built a massive global brand, and remains one of the most recognized artists in human history. Yet, at the exact moment of his death, he was completely ruined. By 2009, his financial situation was a catastrophe. He owed $500 million to a vast network of creditors, with much of that debt already in default and racking up steep interest. The biggest pop star on earth was entirely insolvent. To understand how someone generates that much wealth and keeps none of it, you have to look at how he was built. This is 2300 Jackson Street in Gary, Indiana. 9 children and 2 parents shared this tiny 2-bedroom home with a single bathroom. The ticket out of that house was music. Joe Jackson, a steel mill worker and frustrated musician himself, turned his sons into a highly polished act. He enforced grueling, hours-long rehearsals where any misstep was met with an immediate beating from a belt. By age 7, Michael was performing late at night in adult nightclubs, witnessing fights and stripteases. The psychological toll was so intense that years later, he admitted the mere sight of his father would make him physically vomit. Long before the world started buying his records, the system around Michael Jackson was already running. The very first asset it extracted from him was his right to be a child. The brutal methods worked. The Jackson 5 signed with Motown, and their first 4 singles hit #1. But behind the bright smiles and coordinated outfits of this multi-million-dollar machine, a young boy was hiding deep psychological scars. When Michael finally confessed the extent of that abuse during a 1993 interview with Oprah Winfrey, his father didn't apologize. Joe Jackson went on television the very next day and used the media attention to promote a new business venture. That reaction captures the exact dynamic that defined Michael's life. He was surrounded by a family enterprise built on the premise that his commercial output mattered, while his humanity did not. That deep insecurity followed him into adulthood. Joe Jackson regularly mocked Michael's appearance, specifically telling him he had a fat nose. Those taunts planted the seeds for the multiple plastic surgeries he began pursuing in the early 1980s. But the public scrutiny reached a fever pitch as his skin began to dramatically lighten. The media mocked him, pushing a narrative that he was obsessed with altering his face to intentionally erase his race. The clinical reality was entirely different. His autopsy confirmed what he had stated for years. He suffered from a severe case of vitiligo, an autoimmune disease that physically destroyed his skin's pigmentation. The public and the press took a devastating medical condition and a childhood trauma and repackaged them into a bizarre punchline. It was a complete public stripping of his dignity. Seeking refuge, he spent $19.5 million to buy a massive property in California. He built Neverland Ranch into a sprawling private amusement park, spending millions on annual maintenance in a desperate attempt to manufacture the childhood he never actually had. But creating a Peter Pan fantasy world made him incredibly vulnerable. In 1993, he faced accusations of abuse involving a 13-year-old boy. The boy's father, Evan Chandler, had actively demanded money from Jackson before ever going to the police. Police raids found 0 physical evidence, and criminal charges were never filed. But Jackson chose to settle the civil suit for roughly $23 million. That single decision fractured his public reputation and severely damaged his future earning power. Fast forward to 2007, and the financial math of his life had broken down. This graphic shows his balance sheet. On paper, court documents show he held a massive $567 million in assets, largely driven by his highly valuable stake in the Sony ATV music catalog. But assets are not cash. Despite that massive portfolio, he had less than $700,000 in actual liquid cash on hand to pay his bills. Then came the liabilities. He had taken out massive loans to fund his lifestyle and cover legal settlements. He was carrying $500 million in debt. You can own the most valuable music rights on the planet, but if relentless borrowing and a ruined reputation dry up your cash flow, the math always catches up with you. The 50-day This Is It residency in London served as a last resort financial rescue operation. He had to perform to save himself from total bankruptcy. The physical and mental pressure of mounting those shows was crushing. To endure the crippling insomnia and stress, he turned to his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, who administered the surgical anesthetic propofol just so Jackson could sleep. He died from an overdose of that anesthetic on June 25th, just days before the tour was supposed to launch. He left behind a fractured family and an estate in immediate default on $500 million. After decades of being treated as a product, the sheer pressure to monetize his body one last time ultimately killed him. Yet, the moment he died, the financial equation flipped. His estate executors immediately stepped in to restructure the Sony ATV catalog deals and stabilize the cash flow that had eluded him in life. Unburdened by his complex personal life, the Michael Jackson brand became a highly efficient machine again. Through global licensing, the Broadway production MJ the Musical, and major catalog deals, his estate has generated more than $2 billion since his death. Joe Jackson controlled his early years. The press redefined his face. Relentless borrowing consumed his money, and the physical demand to pay it all back ended his life. That same brand now generates more wealth every year than he could ever access while he was alive. Did the people around Michael Jackson fail him, or was his financial collapse inevitable? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and subscribe for more stories.